Well, it's 2016 and time to close out the last theme of 2015, which was the dreaded self-portrait. And it seems most of you chickened out, but we do have quite a few submissions and it's time to do the theme video. As always, this is the system I'm going to use. First criteria is, does it fit the theme? Second criteria is artistic and aesthetic considerations, which are largely opinion. And the third consideration is technical considerations, things like focus and camera settings, etc. Grading system: A, I wish I had taken that picture. B, I would be happy having taken that picture. C, I probably would not keep the picture. And D, it does not, well, it does meet the requirements, but it has major flaws, technical flaws, such as focus or processing or something like that. Alright, first image is my image, and it was actually taken prior to the month, but I have that leeway. I get a few extra days in order to submit an image as an example. And this is a portrait I did with a one light and a reflector. The light is camera right to the front, and the reflector is camera left to my rear, and serves to hold the edges of my head, hat, coat, and provide some separation from the background. I think that worked pretty well. Let's look at the camera settings. It was a Nikon 1, which is a 2.7 crop factor and small sensor, small pixels. Does not perform well with noise. Even at the minimum ISO, there's a bit of noise. I used a 13mm zoom at 13mm and 5.6, which was the max setting, and it's a compromise of depth of field and diffraction with those tiny pixels on the sensor. It's already really into diffraction at f5.6, but it being at 5.6 and max aperture, it's not going to be as sharp as it could otherwise be. So just compromise, a limited camera lens setup, and it's what I chose to go with as a compromise. ISO 160 is the lowest it'll do, and being that it performs so poorly at higher ISOs, I made that sacrifice, and it resulted in a 1/50th shutter speed, which is marginally long for holding still and not blinking or anything like that. But I think it worked well enough. If we look at the image full size, it seems sharp enough, and so I don't think the aperture shutter speed compromise affected the image too poorly. Few things I think I could have done better. I could have easily used something so that I could see myself posing. A mirror, or tethered the camera to a laptop. Well, the Nikon 1 couldn't, but if I used a DSLR, I could have tethered it. Something that I could see what I was doing. I did not notice that my collar had done this funny curve thing, and I think it might have been better if that hadn't been that way, or I find it just a little distracting here. It kind of works like a leading line, but I think it could have been better either laid flat or used intentionally. The other thing is the head pose. A little bit of a tilt relative to the shoulders, and the body's off, it turned slightly. I think that's all worked well, but the head tilt, being camera position being a little higher looking up, has resulted in eyes being buried and kind of cut off a little bit. A little worse on this left side than on the right. That's a little less than ideal. It was done in an attempt to eliminate glare on the glasses, and I did a good job of eliminating the glare, but this is not a particularly masculine vantage point, looking down slightly. Now the slight tilt also has resulted in a more defined jawline by hiding the neck, and I can certainly benefit from that. And so that's worked well, and it's also prevented nose up, looking up the nose type of vantage. But camera down, looking up at the camera is a little less masculine. This isn't bad. The 13 millimeter is actually about a 45 millimeter effective, but the working distance was only about 5 feet. Anytime you get under about 10 or 12 feet or so, you start getting perspective distortion. So my nose is a little bigger, and my chin and lips are a little more prominent than they would be if I used a longer focal length, or really a greater distance to the subject myself. It's really the distance that causes it. But, you know, I don't think I could use enough tricks to make this a flattering portrait, so I didn't mind the idea that it would be a little bit distorted perspective-wise. My nose would be a little bigger, my lips a little more elongated face, and I also processed this in a fairly unflattering manner. I just didn't feel like flattering was going to work for me, so I went the other direction. So all in all, I'm pretty happy with this image, and I give it a B. The next image we have is by Glenn, and both images submitted by Glenn are in Adobe RGB, and that's problematic. Being that I took it from the web, it should be in sRGB. Now, I don't know if this is the level of brightness and contrast that you saw on your computer, because it was not in the correct color space for the web. Now that it's in Lightroom, it should be recognizing the color space and displaying it correctly. So I should be seeing what you saw here in Lightroom, but not necessarily on the web. And so need to correct the color space issues. Okay, looking at the image itself, let's look at camera settings. We have 50mm f1.8 lens used at f5.6, so stop down for sharpness and depth of field. That looks like it's worked well. ISO 100 minimum, which has also worked well. For black and white, you can get away with more ISO noise, so I don't know that I would necessarily have chosen ISO 100 with the resulting 1/4 second shutter speed, as longer shutter speeds are more difficult to hold still for, but it looks like you've managed that as well. So all in all, I don't have an issue. Minimum ISO is never a bad choice, and the quarter shutter speed has not seemed to have hurt, so I can't complain. Looking at the image itself, first thing, we have a singular subject in a symmetrical pose. Anytime you have a singular subject and or a symmetrical composition, centered composition or framing, tends to work well. It's not necessarily the only option, but it's usually the option I lean towards, particularly when things are symmetrical. And we have a very symmetrical image here. All right, looking at it, it's too bright for me. And looking at it, we've got 3 light sources, because I have 3 catch lights. They're small, which means hard, but because there's 3 of them, they're really filling in almost all of the shadows. The shadows are not harsh, so we'd call this more or less flat lighting, where all the shadows are primarily filled in. So even though they're small, hard light sources, it has not resulted in hard lighting. It's resulted in flat lighting, which works well, probably better than a singular hard small light source would for this image. So not a big problem there. I would just address some of the catch lights. And looking at the expression and the black and white treatment, I would process this image pretty harsh. So first thing I would do here is I think I would bring down highlights a bit. And you'll notice when I'm working with highlights up here in the histogram, highlights are not the brightest. Whites are the brightest. So I'm going to also bring down the whites a little bit. Kind of equalize those highlights and whites. Try to bring those down together. So that's about the starting exposure I would look for. And I'm also going to bump the clarity quite a bit, and that's going to increase the mid-tone contrast and make things stand out quite a bit, and grungy kind of treatment, which I think works for this. Overall, I'm going to address a few little issues individually. Alright, next thing I'm going to do is we're going to deal with these catch lights. And I'm using a Wacom tablet and a pen, and with a pen it is flow sensitive, so I can have my flow set way up here at 1, and I can have very high settings here, but if I press very lightly I get very little result. If I press hard I get a significant result. If I hover over that, you can see the masking that resulted from that. And even though I went over this several times, it's still less dense than having gone over it just a couple times up above. So that's quite useful, and I use it a lot. Let me delete that adjustment. And we're going to go in here and do some exposure adjustments. Let's start with a negative exposure, large brush. I'll bring this area down just a bit. Alright, I'm going to treat the cheeks a little bit. I'll go ahead and treat the beard a little bit, make that stand out. Knock this part of the lips down. And maybe define the side of the nose a little bit in here. Just make it stand out. We'll go the other direction with a new brush. And I have my buttons on my pen set to automatically switch to a new brush. I'm going to bring up a little bit in a few areas. This is basically, I don't know what you'd call it, color grading, dodge burning. Ooh, bad. Undo that. Alright, maybe we'll switch back to that one, bring that ear down just a touch. Alright, I'm pretty happy with that. We're going to get a new brush, and we're going to work on the amount of skin texture in that area. And Lightroom's not the best choice for this, but it's what we're using. So I'm going to go down here and clear up all these effects. I'm going to bring up shadows. I'm going to bring down clarity. The shadows should take I'll bring up blacks as well. Should take the darker areas, bring it up to match the lighter areas, which will reduce the appearance of texture, and as will the clarity setting. That looks a little blotchy right there, so I'm going to erase that. Alright, that's knocked it down a bit, and I can play with the settings here, maybe take the clarity down even further. Bring the shadows up. That's helped a bit. Maybe I'll take these blacks, bring those up, and then I'll bring the entire areas down just a hair to kind of try to get them to match. Somewhere around there. Right, new brush. I'm going to work on the eyes. Reset everything, double click on that. Bring the exposure up a bit. Make the brush larger. I'm going to bring up the eyes overall, just slightly. I'm going to bring the brush down in size. And actually, before I do this, I'm going to clone. I'm going to get rid of these catch lights. I'm just going to get rid of the lowest one. Try right about here. Really don't like what it did. Put it there. Change the opacity. See how that looks. That looks okay. Could probably be made a little smaller, so it's not affecting the pupil. We'll add another one right here. That seems to have worked well enough. I'll just bring it down here to a really black area. And I can shift it over using the arrow keys into a new position. I can select the other end of it here and shift that with the arrow key. See how that worked. I moved it too far. It's a little better on the left. Okay, like that. I'll do the same over here. Don't like that selection. That's good. Get that catch light. Let's try this area. Let's see how that looks. That looks better. Could play with it longer. And we'll go back to the brush. Got a new brush, got exposure increase, got a small brush. Now I'm going to work on the eyes. I'm just going to bring up the iris a little bit for this area, both eyes. And then grab a new brush, reduce the exposure a little bit, and I'm just going to bring this area here down to match the other eye. Alright, get rid of all the brush settings. Zoom back out. Alright, and I guess the last thing we probably need to address are some stray hairs. So, why is it doing that? Need to address some stray hairs down here. So I'm going to put that into healing mode, and I'm going to just kind of let it do what it wants. Let's see how that looks. Maybe a little blotchy. You can work on that if it mattered to you, but I think it's okay. So this is the finished result. Is about what I would do with this image, as this is where we started. This final result here, I think I would give this a B+. This is in the bordering on A for me. I really like it treated like this. Alright, next image is also by Glenn and also in Adobe RGB. And this image has a better exposure as a starting point. Now, when I mentioned my image, I talked about the high camera angle. Here we have a more square-on camera angle, which is a little more masculine feeling than mine. And then this image is a little camera perspective, the camera low angle looking up. And that generates a sense of height and masculinity and dominance. But it also results in a little bit of an up nose perspective. So to fix that, I think this image would be better with a little forward head tilt. The forward head tilt will cause to make the chin, under chin area, it'll exacerbate any double chin type effect. And in order to correct that or prevent that, you kind of have to stretch your head towards the camera to stretch out that portion of the neck. The low angle here is also exposed more of the under chin area, which may or may not be desirable. So in this image, I think a little bit of a downward head tilt, so it's not quite as much up the nose, and then a little forward stretch to emphasize the jawline and hide that under chin might have been better. This image is not as symmetrical a composition, or a little off center. I don't know that it's better or worse. And it's got the top of the head cropped off, which I don't know is better or worse either. I think in this image we've adjusted here so that the collarbone is level and the neck head is not, resulting in a little bit of the masculine head tilt type feel away from the camera, tilted away from the camera, and all that has worked. So for this image, you could process it the same as the other image, or you could leave it alone. And with just dealing with a few things, the catch lights, stray hairs, things like that, I think this image is again in the B range. Alright, here we have an image by M, and it's a self-portrait. Looking at the camera settings, we've got a 35mm f1.8 used at f5.6, which is a good choice. Perhaps stop down further than absolutely necessary, but when you're trying to get focus on the eyes, more depth of field certainly helps when you can't really see the viewfinder. Resulting in an ISO 401/5 of a second, a little bit long on the exposure, but it seems to have worked well. I can see the eyelashes and eyes are quite sharp. Depth of field placement looks good. And so I don't really have any major issues with the settings used. Looking at the image, first thing I look at is the composition, and normally I would complain about lines intersecting the head, and this image has a bunch of them. We've got a line here, we've got lines here, we got a line here, we got this line, they're all cutting into the head, and normally I would say that's a major negative, but in this case there's so many of them that it doesn't really negatively impact the image. They kind of just all say, look at me, and that's kind of the point. So we'll call them all leading lines, and it works. Normally I would complain. I do think that this pillow over here to the left, this sucker, is kind of like a floating element and is not really adding to the image. So one of the first things I would do here is I would crop that out. Yeah, I probably not want to crop quite this hard. Crop it a little less and then clone it out. But that's more of a pain in the butt than I'm willing to do here. So I'm just going to crop it a little harder. And then we're left with this area up here being a large monotone light area, which is a little bit of a distractor. If this had been taken at the opposite arm of the chair, or the chair repositioned to where the bookshelf was a constant backdrop, I think that would have been better. But as it is, this isn't bad. Right? Bookshelf, you could say it's distracting because there's a lot of colors and it's busy, but this is a portrait and kind of an environmental portrait in that the books, a love of reading, that's part of a personality, and that conveys by using it as the backdrop. So if you love to read and books are a big part of your life, and etc., etc., then using it as a backdrop is quite appropriate. So I'm not going to complain about that either. All right, looking at the image, we've got a bit of light issues, just specular reflections, and we have a mismatch of white balance. On this side of the face, over here on the chair, this side of the hair, we have a warmth due to incandescent lighting, household lighting. And then on this side, we've got a cooler feel due to, I'm guessing, window light. The larger catch light seems to indicate window light. And that's not a simple fix. It's a mismatch of lighting, and if I fix the incandescent color, I'm going to affect the daylight color. And I don't really have, I could mess with the brush. We could adjust this. Go ahead and reset all the effects. We can try taking the temp towards blue here. And we can try to bring up some of this, get rid of some of the orange that's in there. I don't have to be too concerned with exact settings because I can tweak them. It's pretty finicky, and it's not really liking the result overall. Especially, you can see it's turning this blue. That's certainly not what we want. I can erase it from there. Let's see how that worked. So we'll go before and after. Nah, it's too excessive. Definitely excessive. Maybe in there. It's a little better balanced, but you'd have to mess with it a lot. So in this case, I would consider leaving it alone as orange. Maybe editing in Photoshop if you really wanted to mess with it. I don't mind the warmth, and I kind of wish there's a little more warmth overall. So we're going to go back to the image, and we're going to do some adjustments here. I'm going to bring down highlights a bit for those speculars of the skin texture. I'm also going to bring down whites a bit because they're the brightest part. I'm going to bring up the shadows a hair. Right about there, I think. And I'm going to reduce clarity overall. Not a lot, but a bit. Make this image a little softer overall. And we can bring that back in individual areas. So to do that, address these things a little further. Zoom in. And we're going to work on these skin areas. First, let me go ahead and I'll just remove that stray hair. Not that it's very distracting or anything. I won't get too stressed about it. Ooh, don't like what it did. Alright, so first thing we want to do is fix this one. Do not pick that area. Sometimes I don't know what the heck Lightroom is thinking. Definitely want to pick areas that have the same skin texture effect. And you can see how it's kind of blotchy there. That's because it's in heal mode and it's picking up the dark hairline. So I'll get better results here with it in clone. And we'll take the opacity down a bit. And I think maybe the same is true of this one. Come on, you stupid thing. Sometimes I don't know what it is thinking. There we go. Switch that over to clone as well. And reduce its opacity. Shift it over a bit. Alright, so that takes care of some of those stray hairs that were not really a problem as such. I just did it because I can. Alright, and then we're going to work on overall. Let's reset our effects. We don't want to putting white balance adjustments. I'm going to pull clarity way down on this. And I'm going to just work on some of these highlight areas a little bit. And clarity is not the best choice, in my opinion. It's not the best choice, but it's the best choice we have here in Lightroom. So it's what we're going to use today. But if I wanted to get really involved with this, I would be using Photoshop for these kind of edits and advanced techniques. See if we can get. Let's see if we can do something with those highlights. Let's try bringing up shadows a little bit in those areas. Try and get it to be a little smoother overall. Let's try killing some sharpness. In those areas. Just trying to get rid of some of that blotchiness. Much easier to do in Photoshop. But here's where we started. Here's where it is now. All right, and I think that's a little better. I'm going to see if we can address just this little bit on the eyelid. Ooh, what's going on there? For whatever reason, that looks really bad. That looks really bad. Z. Alright, so right in there. Don't know why I did that. Let's get a new brush. And it's probably the clarity setting causing that. Clarity and lack of sharpness. I want to do that a bit. We'll bring up the shadow part. Equalize it. Good enough, I guess. Alright, and then I think the only thing here I would do left is treat the eyes a little bit. So new brush, reset everything. We'll bump on the exposure, and we'll just brighten up the eyes a little bit. And just in the area of the catch light, but that was a mistake. I need a new brush. Bring that down. Just knock that area down a little bit. Create some contrast and drama in the eye. And I'll make this even smaller. And bring out the edge of the eye a little bit. Alright, and then let's take a look out. Always got to be careful about over editing images. I tend to do it a lot. Let's zoom out. Alright, that's where we're at. That's where we started. That's where we're at. I think we could bring back some clarity and sharpness in areas. So let's zoom in here, get a new brush. And Bring up clarity, replace a lot of that we removed earlier with the global setting, sharpness, and we're just going to quickly address a few spots. Bring those up. Right. That might be a bit much on the lip there, but it's in the general idea of what I would do. Alright, so here's where we started, and here's where we ended up. And I think this image for me is a B. I like it. Nice seeing you, Em. Alright. Next image is by me again, and this is a little bit of a Photoshop composite. I used a bucket to put my foot on, and then I edited that out and replaced it with a picture that I made in Photoshop. It's a picture I took of the elk, but then I made the frame and the matting and all that stuff in Photoshop. And the only reason I included this picture is to show that, you know, all the nitnoid stuff that I talk about all the time doesn't necessarily matter. This is not a great image, but it is one of the most popular images I've ever put up. It went a little bit viral on Facebook, and that's because it says something people connected with and liked, wanted to hear. And I called it Trophy Hunter, and it's what I do. I hunt trophies with a camera instead of killing them and mounting them on my wall. And a lot of people like that message. But technically, it's not a good image. Lighting's okay, pose is okay, everything about that, so I don't really have a problem. But the background's not great, the settings not great, the image itself, camera settings aren't great. Camera itself's not great. Almost never generates great results. And if you look in here, there's more in the fabric, things like that. Even if I did attempt to adjust this with a Moire brush, it doesn't seem to do anything to this. So no matter what I do here, I would have to live with it, which is what I chose to do, or get very advanced and spend a lot of time on it, which is not really worth it. So well, it's not a great image. It's a good image, very good image, and a very popular image. And so, like I said, the only reason I included it was to show that, you know, I get wrapped up about technical details and little fine things that you see at 100% zoom, etc., and really that doesn't always matter. In fact, it doesn't generally matter as much as connecting with the viewer. That's what really matters. That's what we're really trying to do with our photography. And so just keep things in perspective. All right, here's an image by Peter. Nice tight headshot. Looking at the settings, we've got 88 millimeters on a 70-200 2.8, so right about mid-range somewhere, towards the low end, but not at either end where most zoom lenses struggle a little bit. And it's wide open, but being that it's a 70-200 2.8L lens, it should still be plenty sharp, but the depth of field is going to be pretty awful thin at 100 millimeters, close to 100 millimeters and 2.8. You know, you're looking at if this was taken from, I would guess about 5 to 10 feet, somewhere in there. At 10 feet, 100 millimeters f11 would be 2 foot depth of field. So f5.6 is 1 foot, f2.8 is 6 inches, and then at 5 feet you're down to about 3-inch depth of field, somewhere in there. So the depth of field's getting pretty thin. I'm just guesstimating, but the point is it's pretty thin. Difficult for portraits, self-portraits anyways. Long shutter speed, 1/10 of a second, not terribly long, but difficult as far as, you know, not blinking, those kind of things. And an ISO of 2000. Obviously 2.8, trying to keep the ISO reasonable because it's a 5D SR, and at ISO 2000 I expect we're going to see a bit of luminance noise, chroma noise, and we do. It's giving an impression of detail largely in this image, but as we process it, it's going to get worse. So ISO 2000 is really pushing it for that sensor. If you need it, you need it. Looking at that image again, the eyes don't seem as sharp as they could be. It looks like, well, the glasses and the hair is not either, but the mustache and beard is. So maybe the depth of field, you know, I don't know. The tip of the nose isn't. So we're really looking at a, well, I said it was maybe a 3-inch depth of field. It looks like we might be down around 1 inch or less. So the lens distance wasn't, it's pretty close. Or, you know, you blinked or something. I don't know. Not bad. It's usable. All right. So, looking at the image, I like the pose. I like the angle. I like pretty much most everything except for right here. This area looks like it was clipped and perhaps attempted to recover. It's a little on the gray side, which means probably highlights were pulled down or exposure was pulled down, but there was nothing there to recover. C'est la vie, because of the way it was. Now, I think if supplemental lighting had been used, a flash that was just restricted to the face primarily, you had dropped the background and maybe prevented losing that catch light, that would have been better, because that's the direction I see this image going in, and that's the direction I'm going to process it. And a bit grittier. I think gritty works for guys a lot. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the highlights down, and that should work on the background, bringing those areas down. I'm going to pull the shadows up just a bit. And I'll pull whites down a bit. Somewhere in there. And then I'm going to drive clarity way up. Max that right out. And this image looks very red to me on my computer, and it's recently calibrated. This looks very red. Maybe your skin is very red, but I'm going to go ahead and bring some of that saturation down. And there's some orange to it as well. I'll bring that down. It's going to affect the goggles a little bit, so I'm going to use it less of that. And I'm going to bring up the red luminance, brighten up your face. And then I'm going to go back here to the basics, and this is something I do a lot. I'm going to bump the vibrance quite a bit, and then I'm going to take most of it out with saturation. Alright. So I like the effect that gives. If I go over here to a before after, this is before the vibrance shift. You'll see light differences, and this is after. It's lightened up the skin, retained a lot of the brassy stuff, treated this area well. So that's about how I see. That's what I'm going to do. How about that? All right, I'm going to go in here and address some things with brushes. Make sure everything is set to 0. And I'm going to start with negative exposure. I'm going to knock the background way down. Make this larger. This is giving the effect of had we used a light on the face. So had we used a speed light or something like that, directed and restricted to the face, this is more the result we would have got in camera. And this is how I see this image. I'm going to bring this down. I'm going to see if I can't deal a little bit with some of this. Just knock it down with some exposure. Alright, we'll get a new brush. Go the opposite direction, bring up the exposure. Bring this area up just a bit. Make the glasses stand out a little bit more. Alright, I'm going to deal with bring the eyes up. Okay, that seems a little excessive on the eyelid there. Bring those eyes up a little bit. Make them pop. I'll bring the size down. I'll treat the eye a bit. Something like that. And get a new brush. And we'll do a little bit of dodge and burning for the image overall. I'm going to set this lower. So half. I'll bring up just a few areas. And just basically a little bit of contouring. Grab a new brush with the opposite direction. And I'll just emphasize some things like that. And something around there, I think, is how I would treat this. Overall, I think I'm going to go back. I'm going to bring up the red luminance a little more, make the face brighter. Somewhere in there. And that's, take a close look, processing his exaggerated some of that noise. And it looks like there's a few hot pixels in here, little points that are moving around. One's there, one's there. Those could be cloned out easily. I'm not going to mess with them. They're small enough and few enough to not really worry about. And we can go in here to detail, and we'll just knock some of this luminance noise down. And I think that works pretty well. I would prefer the eyes sharper. We could try to add sharpness to the eyes, but you really can't generally add something that's not there. So I'll give it a quick shot, but I don't expect a lot from it. It's really just going to add noise. I'm actually not even seeing much of any result. Sharpness. See what that looks like compared to before. And I don't know. Maybe it helped a little bit. Maybe it's too much. I think the eyes have gotten a little too bright. And it definitely affected the eyelids. I'm going to just leave the sharpness off. I don't think it's actually helped. Alright, so this is the finished result and what I see this image going to, and this is where we started. As an original, I would put this in the C area, to perhaps even D for lack of sharpness on the eyes. And here I would put this as a B image. B plus. If we had started with sharp eyes, I would put this bordering on A. So, nice portrait. Nice to see ya. Alright, here we have an image by MJ, the second image by MJ. Camera settings, f8, 35mm, 1/80th, ISO 400. 35mm for a environmental shot, a loose shot like this. I would not think you need to stop down to f8 for as much depth of field. So you wouldn't necessarily need f8 or ISO 400. Shutter speed is certainly suitable. It's still, you know, on the slow side for photographing people, but a couple shots you should be able to pull that off. And if we zoom in, it does not look entirely sharp, and I don't know what's the cause. I don't know what the cause is. Let me see what camera was used. D3200. I don't think f8 should have been a problem. So I don't think this is diffraction limiting, causing it to be this soft. I don't really know what is. Maybe processing. But at any rate, I would expect it to have been sharper, f8, and I think it should have been sharper even at a wider aperture than f8, so I don't know what's going on there. Overall, I like this image. I like the pose. I like expression. I like the environmental aspect, outdoorsy, got the rubber muck boots on and stuff. So all that works for me. As far as the setting goes, this area back here, a bit distracting. You know, it's a bright area and it doesn't go with the rest of the image. So a little better background selection could have been perhaps more optimal. And pose-wise, 3/4, relaxed, leaning on the tree, all that works well. The only thing is, my comment would be the remote in that hand position because of it. A little tip, you can set the camera to self-timer, use the remote to trip the timer, and then give yourself 10 seconds or so to change the hand position and hide the remote, and that would have worked better. Overall, as it is, I don't really see anything I could do to significantly improve this image, and I would give this image a C+, I think. It's something with the sharpness and detail is gone awry. So, and I don't know what, that's pushing it towards the D range as far as having technical faults. But at the smaller size, display size and stuff, it doesn't really show. And so I'm in the C, it's a C+. Better background, I think, would put it into C plus B range, or even B plus. Maybe we fix the technical as well. So that's about where I see this image. Alright. Next image is by Heather, and this is a neat high key attempt. Rather image, not just an attempt, it was done. Okay, so 34mm on a zoom lens. Stop down a couple stops for sharpness, and I think that has worked well. ISO is reasonably low, and I don't see a lot of issue with that. Now this eye here is less sharp than that eye, even though camera position seems to be pretty straight on. So I'm guessing that 1/8 shutter speed just didn't quite work as well for this image. I fluttered a little bit. I don't know. Could perhaps have used less of stopping down. 34mm on that lens should have been about f4, somewhere around there. f5, 6, or might have been enough. And being that this is a mood shot, I think that ultimate sharpness is not really critical. So I think perhaps a little more shutter speed, compromising either the aperture or the ISO a little further, would have been perhaps a better choice overall, just to prevent the motion issue. Looking at the image, first thing I see is a lot of clipping. All this, you look at it, notice right here when I hover over it, it says 100. Everything is blown. It's blown there, it's blown there, blown in all sorts of spots. And that's okay if we were to show this on, say, a white website. It would blend in nicely, which is kind of cool, but then we still have this issue, so it's not enough. And is it going to be on a white website or not? I don't know. On more typical website display and printing, all this clip to whites would not reproduce real well. It would get what's called paper white. You can only go as bright as the paper. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull highlights down. I'm going to pull whites down until I get it free of the side there. And then I'm going to bring up the overall exposure, pushing it back towards that high key feeling. So here's before, here's after. But if you look at the blown areas, all along here in the corner and stuff, it doesn't really change. Doesn't really change. But if we look at the histogram, nothing's blown. If I go back to the previous, it won't let me. Go over here. All that's blown. Whereas after the edits, nothing's blown. It hasn't affected the image significantly. So that's more what I would do. Now we do have a little bit of things in here. You've got a little mottled and grayer. We could bring up some shadows, should affect that area. I'm going to bring down the blacks, make it this a little more contrasty, a little more extreme as far as that goes. In here, I think we'd have to go in with a brush. And trying to get rid of some of that modeling. And then in this area here, I think you would need to clone that out. We can give that an attempt here. I would probably do this in Photoshop because I really just don't like the way Lightroom does a lot of this stuff. It's just coarser with a lot less control. When you come around, we can sit there and try to treat these areas. Not necessarily want it to be white. Basically, I'm trying to get rid of the appearance, or how apparent it is that that's armpit. And just kind of kind of fade it out a bit. So I often just do not know what the heck it's thinking. That's the other side of it. I often just do not know what the heck Lightroom is choosing and thinking or why it's doing it, but it works well enough. And like I said, in here I would go in a little more work on getting rid of some of that blotchiness in the exposure. Sit here and we can try bringing that up a little further. See what we've done. So I have to bring the whites down. Yeah, that's probably a bit excessive, but it's getting in the direction I would want to go with this. Just kind of eliminate some of that distraction. And then for me, the left side of this image is not really contributing. Maybe it was composed that way for the 1/3 rule, but I don't really care. I would pull this in more like this, and maybe get rid of some of this negative space here as well. And then I would trim the bottom as necessary for framing composition. See where we're at with this. That's a 5x7. That's 2:3 as if out of camera. So we'll leave it at that. Alright, so nice high key image. Just a few minor details to address, I think, to even it out, make it just a little less distracting. And I like this image. I think I would put this in a B range. It's in the B range. Maybe B minus, but I don't know what I would like to do differently that would make it, you know, a B plus or an A. I don't have a suggestion as far as that goes. So I guess I'll have to put this in the solid B area for me. Nice job. All right, another image by by Heather. And we have pretty much the same settings. Just zoomed in a little bit more. Interesting. So as far as settings goes, pretty much the same comments. Only thing here is right offhand the perspective or distance of the camera lens has caused this hand to be a bit large. It's kind of, so it's not very flattering. I think it works well as a hand position, and as far as, you know, showing that you're holding your son, that works well. So for this, I think a longer lens from further away to flatten the perspective a bit might have been a better choice. Looking at the image as far as sharpness and stuff goes, I think it's plenty sharp. It's a mood image, so sharpness isn't as important as the mood that the image conveys, and it's a soft subject, meaning, message of caring and affection and such, that even a softer, even somewhat hazy type of image would help convey that as well. First thing I see is, to me, is the image is too contrasty. It's like too bright. I want it toned down a bit. See what we've got for clipping in whites. Not too bad. I'm going to hold shift and double click on white and let it automatically set the white level where it thinks it should be, and it's saying minus 100. So it's saying the whites are set pretty hard in this image, and I would agree with that. I like it set at minus 100. Right, I think I would go ahead and kill some contrast, and I would kill some clarity. Make this a softer image overall. I think I would bring up some shadows, or just to even out that lighting a little bit so it's not as harsh. And then maybe bring the overall exposure down. Give this more of a soft light, evening, morning light just starting to come through, or just finishing coming through. Something like that. And we'd go ahead and kind of knock this down a bit with exposure to put the emphasis a little more where we want it. So I'm going to kind of knock some of this stuff back down. That might be a bit much there. And then we could mess around with tweaking this more, but I'm pretty happy with where it's sitting now. So I think this is about what I would do with this image. A little softer treatment overall to go with the soft message, sense carrying message that is the subject of this image. So here's where we started. This is where we ended up, and for this image I think I would be in the B minus range, somewhere around there. I think for any client that would love this image, it would be an A plus. And I just think maybe, like I said, a little bit of composition and camera placement, lens selection would have perhaps helped this image a little more. But all in all, we're in the solid B range, I think. Nice job. All right, here's an image by Karen, and this image is in ProPhoto RGB. And as far as general web usage and printing, ProPhoto is even less supported and correctly interpreted by print shops and applications, programs, than Adobe RGB is. So while using ProPhoto to edit in is a good idea, again, output as sRGB, particularly for the web. And perhaps because of that, this image is rather flat in my opinion. It's pretty monotone, and we can see that from the histogram. And that could be, it shouldn't be color space because Lightroom uses ProPhoto. If an image is tagged correctly, it will use the correct color space for that image. So an image is in Adobe RGB will be displayed correctly in Adobe RGB. ProPhoto will be correct. JPEGs and sRGB will be correct. Lightroom, as long as it's tagged, can apply the correct color space. So I should be seeing this as you saw it when you were editing, except for calibration and screen brightness settings. And I should probably note that my editing environment for this video is a little brighter than I usually edit in, and I neglected to adjust my screen brightness for that. So my edits may be a little brighter on your screen, or rather on my screen, than they would otherwise be. I'm just going to go with it for now. Alright, first thing is it a portrait? And as far as that goes, I'm not sure it quite qualifies. I mean, someone who knows you and can recognize that this is you from your eye and the piercing, maybe it qualifies as a portrait in that aspect. But for most, this is more an idea, a conveyance, but it's not really you as such. So I'll say it's a portrait, but barely. All right, and then what do I want from this image? Well, I want to see you more, and what there is your eye, you know, that connection with the other human, with the eyes, is what I want more of. So that needs to stand out more. And the composition, with the eye being way over here on the edge of the frame, it's kind of lost. So composition wise, I think this is less than ideal. And then we have 4 of these eyes, so we get, I guess, a total of 5 if you wanted to look at it that way, eyes to look at. But I think I would move this composition, and I would bring this over towards this way. It gives me 3 grouping of odd, which is numbers is always good, and then I've got the 1 solitary, which is good. Framing is going to be problematic, but that's about all you can do with it at this point. If there was more, perhaps you'd go up and down with it to get a more conventional framing. Or if this is what works, then you go with this. All right, so for this image, this is what works. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up clarity a lot. I'm going to make those eyes of the peacock feathers pop, make them stand out more. I'm going to bring a lot of these areas out. So we brought up the feathers, we brought up your eye, and unfortunately a little bit of hair and ear, but we can treat those separately. All right, so we're going to go in. What else would I do? I might bring up shadows a little bit. Overall. And then we're going to go back and we're going to selectively adjust those things. So let's start with the exposure. It's already set, so I'm going to bring down some of these areas that I didn't want to come up as much as they did with the global adjustments. Just kind of maybe a little bit of a vignette kind of treatment to it. Yeah, something in that area, I think. I'll grab a new brush, and then we're going to emphasize the eye. So I'm going to bring this area up. So it stands out more and draws more attention. I'll grab a new brush again, and I'll treat the eye separately. Right in here. Make that pop more. Another brush. Then I'm going to make that eye stand out a little bit more. That's not necessarily the cleanest line I've ever drawn. But it works. It's looking a little, I don't know, dragonish, perhaps. Standing out a bit too much, a little too contrasty. So let's take the contrast in this image down a bit overall. Let's go back to that brush and see if we can tone that down just a little bit. Let's take the exposure down a little bit. And see what we got overall. I think I just need to add a new brush, and we're gonna knock down some more areas a little bit. Finish off that vignette type feel. Alright, so this is close to what I would do with it. I might spend more time on it, trying to refine it. But actually I should create a virtual copy. Here's where we started. Pretty flat. The eye is way off the side. There's nothing to really cause you to focus there and create that connection. And then after edits, we have this, which definitely draws more attention to the eye and makes the peacock feathers and everything stand out a little bit more. As it is edited this way, I would put this as a C plus area, C plus, B minus, I think. And one thing I didn't look at, I don't think, was camera settings, so let's take a look at those. 1/400th is a lot of shutter speed. Somewhere around 1/200, 250 is where I generally like to be for photographing people who are cooperative. So you could have used ISO 400. Being that it's a black and white conversion or sepia conversion, I see it looks a little bit yellowish to me. The higher ISO is not necessarily a problem in black and whites. Let's see, f8s stop down for sharpness on the zoom lens, but 80 millimeter, you know, you're probably 4 or 5 or f5, so f8 is probably a good choice for sharpness. So I don't have a problem with that. And perhaps even, I think f8 is a good choice overall. So I think just ISO could have been lower to about 1 to 400, and that might have been slightly better. I don't really see a major issue. Yeah, more sharpness up front than we do behind. And so it could be depth of field or just placement of the depth of field. I think you probably should have had a fairly decent amount of depth of field for both the eye and the peacock feathers. I think it's just placed a little forward, perhaps. So like I said, in this area, C plus image for me. I see potential here in the idea and the concept, and I think with better lighting, this would have conveyed better and been a better result in the end. Okay. And our last image is by Hayward, and this image had no color information associated with it. So in Lightroom here, it is being assigned the ProPhoto default color space, and in the web it's going to be assigned the sRGB color space regardless of what it is, because it has no color space information in the file. Now I know you've since corrected that, but this is what I have as far as your submission goes. Looking at the image, one of the things I noticed right away is noise. I noticed a lot of noise right away. Looking in the background, on the table, on the lamp, arm, and I don't know what would cause that. I have to guess that it's a combination of recovering an underexposed image, because this is a D300, and ISO 400 should not be that noisy on a D300, but a D300, D200, my Nikon 1, they don't tolerate bringing up shadows very well, especially at any ISO above absolute minimum. So that could be contributing to a lot of that noise. Could be color space issue, being that it's now in ProPhoto, being shown as ProPhoto. That could be contributing, and it could be white balance adjustments if the image was taken as a JPEG. That could be contributing as well. I don't actually know what's the cause. We look at the image, sharpness seems pretty good, not optimal. And let's see, we got 35 millimeter at f3.5. I'm going to assume it's a prime and it's an f1.8 or so, and so it stopped down to 3.5 for sharpness, which should be adequate for sharpness, but looks like from what I can see here at 100% zoom, the depth of field isn't quite adequate. Right here in this area on the zipper seems to be the best focus. It's a little less down here, even less out here at the hands, and less back here. So it looks like the depth of field is fairly shallow and may have not quite gotten on the eyes as well. Now again, recovering an image adds noise, which can be perceived as sharpness, but then if you take that out, it's going to cause a softer overall result. I'm trying to get rid of some of that noise in the background. And it's helped some in the table, in the lamp, but I'm not going to get rid of all of it. Hasn't really hurt the sharpness of the image significantly, so I'll leave it alone as far as that goes. So I guess my biggest concern here was probably the initial exposure. Let's take a look and see if it tells me you were in manual exposure, and which means even in manual exposure you're somewhat dependent on the meter, and didn't notice if it tells me what metering. Yeah, you're in a pattern metering mode. Okay, spot metering probably would have been better, giving you a better exposure. I'm guessing that the lamp being in the field of view caused an underexposure, caused the meter to read for an underexposure. So if you centered the needle manually, you're going to get what the meter would have done automatically, which is underexposed due to the bright light source in the frame. So spot metering or center weighted metering would have mitigated that and resulted in a better starting exposure, assuming that's what the problem was. All right. I'm not fond of the sweatshirt. I think the black on black with a hat and stuff, I think that works well, but the sweatshirt just, it doesn't quite fit. Maybe it's you, maybe it's what you like to wear all the time and stuff, but I don't think it suits the portrait as well as just black on black or something else would have. Pose wise, I like the pose, I like the hand on the leg, I like the crossed leg, I like the head tilt. I think overall shifting the chair a little bit to more of an angled perspective would be better instead of quite this square on. And I think composition wise, I would prefer more. I would prefer this to have been taken in portrait orientation and to have included the right leg and foot, most probably. Cut off at the knees a little awkward where it's cropped right now. I think I would prefer more, and I would prefer it to be looser on top as far as more headroom so your hat's not right at the edge. Editing this image, I don't really see anything that I would do at this point. It looks pretty decent to me. Got some blown areas here. You can see there, well, most of it's reading just below blown, but there is a little bit in there that could be pulled down with whites. You can see it went to blue, which is saying the blue wavelength is what's clipping at this point. when it goes white, it means all colors. Then otherwise it'll show you what spectrum R, G, or B is clipping. So now nothing's clipping in there. It hasn't really made a significant difference to the image. So overall on this image, I give this image a, well, it's bordering on D for initial exposure and noise that has resulted from recovery and white balance and color space issues. Ignoring that, I would put this image as a C plus in that area. I think it certainly connects as far as conveying a portrait and personality and those kind of things. So I think that works. I think compositionally I would change it to put it into the B range. And then, to get it to get any portrait into an A range, it really needs to have, I don't know, something of a wow factor, I guess. It needs to be artistic, for me anyways. For a portrait to get into the A range, it really needs to have a real artistic treatment and message to go along with it. And maybe that's because I'm just not a people person. I don't know. So we don't have any A's, and that's probably a personal issue on my part. But this one, like I said, C range and potential for C plus B range with just some minor adjustments to the composition and positioning. And overall, it's a nice image. Nice to see you, Hayward. And that is the end of theme 08. As always, I hope you've found what I've had to say useful and have taken it as intended, as to be useful. And I will see you again next month.